Welcome to Mark Gibson's Human Rights Channel, accountant with designations CPA, MBA, CMA, ACPA, ASA, Australia. Enjoy learning!
Again, good afternoon, class, and welcome to your competency appraisal class. Today, we'll discuss about accounts receivable. No? So, accounts receivable, these are financial assets that represent a contractual right to receive cash or another financial asset from another entity. But that's only the definition, especially for us. No? I'm not sure. Um, But I think generally, mas talagang doon tayo sa atake palagi sa problem eh. But before we go through the different discussion problems that I have prepared for you, let's have a little bit of theoretical part on accounts receivable. No? Para at least buo yung concept, buo yung understanding, and then later on, we'll apply it to the different discussion problems. No? So accounts receivable, initial measurement would be the face amount or original invoice amount. And remember, generally, kakaroon lang naman tayo ng accounts receivable in terms of having sales on credit. No? So therefore, the initial measurement would be the face amount or the original invoice amount. Now, the accounts receivable will be subsequently measured at net realizable value. Ano ba yung net realizable value? So, this is the expected cash collection, but in terms of formula, this will be the gross account receivable less allowances. No? So now this is basic, no? Pero pagtsagaan natin para at least pagdating ngayon dito, let's discuss the different types of allowances. Of course, number one, we have allowance for sales discount. So the pro forma entries are also provided. It's a debit to sales discount and a credit to allowance for sales discount. Now, there's also allowance for sales return. Ito naman yung debit to sales return and credit to allowance for sales return. Next, we have allowance for freight charges. O tandaan, FOB destination, di ba pag FOB destination, it will be the seller. And then pag freight collect, ang ibig sabihin dyan is it was paid by the customer. So therefore, we have to do an entry to to get the net realizable value. So it's a debit to freight out and credit to allowance for freight charges. No? Now, when it's freight collect, so sabi di ba in advance na ni buyer or ni customer yung bayad sa freight. So therefore, we have to reimburse the buyer. So, paano natin i-reimburse? It's either we deduct it from the total AR. No? Okay. Now, siguro ito yung pinaka-famous allowance. No? So we have allowance for doubtful accounts. So when doubtful, well, basically class, pag sinabi natin doubtful accounts, ito yung mga, there's a chance of non-collectibility. So on entry natin, when doubtful, it's debit to doubtful account expenses and credit to allowance for doubtful accounts. Now, when we are going to write off, it's debit to allowance for doubtful accounts and credit to AR. Ito na yung aalisin na talaga natin siya sa accounts receivable balance natin. What if after writing it off, naka-recover tayo? So paano ba yung situation na to? So for example, we assess that Piolo company, si Piolo na lang ulit, no? Hindi pala talaga makakabayad, no? So that's our assessment, no? Towards the end of the year. Di nag-write off na tayo. Ngayon, itong si Piolo, without even being followed up, biglang nagbayad. Yung pala, medyo naka-recover and he wanted to build his credit rating again. And of course, no, non-default or non-paying or non-capacity to pay will impact his credit rating. No? So, ang ginawa niya is he source out money, he builds his business, and then yun nga, biglang pumunta sa atin, ito na, Aloy, o magbabayad na ako, sabi ni Piolo. So paano ngayon ang kailangan natin gawin? Of course, number one, we'll have to set up the accounts receivable balance once again. No? So it's a debit to accounts receivable and credit to allowance for doubtful accounts. So basically, we're just reversing what has been posted as a write-off, no, previously. And of course, dahil nga nagbayad, so it's a debit to cash and credit to accounts receivable. But notice class, upon recovery, the accounts receivable will have a zero balance, no? Kasi mag-offset lang, this is a debit and a credit to AR. Okay. Now, what are the methods of estimating doubtful accounts? So number one, we have percent of sales method. If this is the method to be used, then straight this will go to the doubtful account expense. Next, we have the percent of accounts receivable. So paano to? So say for example, you have 100,000 AR, no? Oh, so and if the method of estimating doubtful account is percent of accounts receivable, so sabi natin 10% of the AR balance would be doubtful. So pag ganun, so uh, you have to recognize it as allowance for doubtful accounts. Now, the third method is the aging of accounts receivable. Paano naman to, class? No? And ano yung difference dun sa nauna na percent of accounts receivable? Pag sinabi kasing aging, so ito na yung may mga bucket. No? Pag sinabi natin bucket, ito yung 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, 90 to 120, and so on and so forth. No? Pero ito, mas specific kasi along with the buckets would be the related rates of doubtful account. No? So say for example, 0 to 30, dahil bago pa, so lower yung percentage being allocated or being inputted as doubtful account. Kasi nga bago pa, current pa, so there's a high chance of collectibility. Now, of course, mas tumatanda or the more your AR age, the higher the non-collectibility percentage is. No? So for example, kung meron kang AR na ang age is 240 days or 365 days and up, imagine, no? Ay ang term mo lang is 1 month. Pero meron kang AR na hindi pa nakokolekta for 1 year and more. No? So, there's a high chance na baka nga 100% non-collectible na yun. Or pwedeng it could be 80%. No? So, that's dependent on the company policy. No? So, what I'm trying to say is in the aging of AR, this is more specific as to the percentage of doubtful accounts. No? Kasi in percent of accounts receivable, this is in total. No? So, total AR balance multiplied by the percent of doubtful account. Okay? Okay. So let's go to the different discussion problems, no, para at least mas ma-reinforce pa yung understanding natin of the theoretical part. Okay, so let's have discussion problem 1. Let me read the requirement. What is the amortized cost of accounts receivable on December 31? So baka magtaka, wala naman akong diniscuss about amortized cost. But class, take note that amortized cost is synonymous or this is similar with the net realizable value. No? So an entity provided the following information for the current year. So you have your accounts receivable beginning for 2 million pesos, credit sales of 10 million, collection from customers excluding recovery of accounts written off, 7.5 million, accounts written off as worthless, 100,000, sales returns of 400,000, recovery of accounts written off for 50,000, estimated future sales returns on December 31 is 300,000 and estimated uncollectible accounts on December 31 per aging is 600,000 pesos. So let's have discussion problem 1. Pa-confirm nga ako na kita na yung Excel file, please.
Yes po, kita po.
Sige, thank you. So, yun na. Lagay ko lang dito yung problem. Then, let's have the solution. Masyadong malaki. So, ang tinatanong sa atin is amortized cost of AR on December 31. Of course, compute muna natin what would be the total gross AR. No? So, para lang at least hindi malito, gawin ko na siyang in millions. Okay, so we have the beginning balance of AR for 2 million. So that's given. Oops. Credit sales of 10 million. Plus, ang una mo natin ginagawa is we're establishing the gross accounts receivable. And based on the information provided, ito yung mga items to calculate for the gross accounts receivable. No? So collection, sabi dito, excluding recovery. No? So that's 7.5 million. So remember class, the reason why, ay kung halimbawa hindi nilagay dito na excluding recovery, there's a chance that we have to deduct it. Kasi remember, dun sa discussion natin kanina, when there is recovery of written of AR, the impact or the net effect to your AR would be 0. Kasi nga, you have established the AR, but at the same time, you have recorded the collection. No? So it should be no effect to your AR. Next, we have accounts written off of 100,000. So given yan. Okay. And then we have sales returns of 400,000. So get the sum. So that's 4 million pesos. Now, this is our gross AR. Pero hindi pa yan yung tinatanong. Ang tinatanong kasi sa atin is amortized cost. So be careful ha. Kasi tignan mo, kung ang question type is multiple choice type, nakita mo na si 4 million, baka na-excite ka, binulugan mo na si 8. Tandaan, amortized cost, this is the net realizable value. Okay, so estimated future sales returns or simply allowance for sales returns of 300,000 pesos. And then estimated uncollectible accounts or simply the allowance for doubtful accounts of 600,000 pesos. So kunin mo yung difference niyan, then you will arrive to the net realizable value of 3,100,000. So the answer is letter D. Okay, so that's problem number 1. Okay, so let's go to problem number 2. The entity provided for doubtful account expense at the rate of 5% of net sales. What amount should be reported as doubtful account expense for the year? So tandaan na, the question relates to the doubtful account expense for the current year. Ano yung method natin? O sabi dyan, doubtful account expense at the rate of 5% of net sales. Okay, so the entity provided the following data for the current year. Allowance for doubtful accounts, January 1 of 180,000. We have sales of 9.5 million. Sales returns and allowances of 800,000. sales discount of 200,000, and accounts written off as uncollectible of 200,000. So let's have problem number 2. Parang nangingiti ka kasi nakikita mo na konti lang yung sample problems natin, no? So ibig sabihin, mas mabilis tayo today. Convert ko lang to millions, ha? Okay, sige. O tandaan, ang tinatanong lang sa atin dito is the doubtful account expense, no? But later on, let's also, para lang at least, let's also touch on the calculation of the ending balance of allowance for doubtful account, no? So let's also do that. No? So remember, the method here is 5% of net sales. No? So of course, with that, we'll have to calculate first the total net sales. So paano yun? We have sales of 9.5 million. Sales returns and allowances of 800,000. That's given class, ha? Wala pa tayong ginagawa. Then sales discount of 200,000. No? So get the difference para mag-arrive tayo sa net sales. Tandaan, because the method used is 5% of net sales kasi 'di ba isa sa mga method natin is percentage of sales, no? So be careful kasi it could be gross sales or net sales, no? So depending on the requirement of the problems. But this time, the requirement is 5% of net sales, no? So careful, yun lang naman yung tip dyan, no? So huwag ma-excite kasi it could be gross sales or net sales. And then remember, if it's gross sales, then ito yung kailangan natin tignan, di ba? That 9.5 million, okay? So we have net sales of 8.5 million pesos. So the percentage of doubtful account is 5%. So, yun yung given. No? So, ngayon, pwede na tayo mag-compute. So, the total doubtful account expense would be 425,000. So, that's 8.5 million multiplied by 5%. So, that's the answer. Ngayon, class, given also this information, we can actually calculate for the allowance for doubtful account expense. No? So we have beginning balance of 180,000. And then the doubtful account expense is already calculated. You know? So lagay na lang natin dyan. And then of course, we have the accounts written off as uncollectible of 200,000. So the balance, the ending balance of your doubtful account would be 405,000. No? Okay, so that's problem number 2. So the answer is letter B, ha, class? So this one. Okay, so moving on to problem number 3. What amount should be recognized as doubtful account expense for the current year? So, pag ganito class yung type of problem, so napansin mo, you're given a debit and credit, no? So, you're given an adjusted trial balance, no? So, the most effective or sabihin lang natin na approach, no, to attack this type of problem would be the use of the accounts. So let me read the problem. An entity provided the following accounts abstracted from the unadjusted trial balance at year end. So you have a debit to accounts receivable of 5 million, allowance for doubtful accounts of 100,000 debit, net credit sales of 20 million. The entity estimated that 10% of the gross account receivable will become uncollectible. So take note, class, the method used is percentage of accounts receivable, but this time it's gross. No? So what amount should be recognized as doubtful account expense? So let's have problem number 3. Okay. Ang sabi natin, 'di ba, the approach that I suggest you to use, pero yun nga, suggestion lang naman yun. I'm sure, no, meron ka rin sariling way to calculate this. So, be that be it, ano. So, allowance for doubtful accounts. So, ginawa ko lang, nagti-account ako. Meron daw balance na debit, no? So, that's debit 100,000. And remember, ano ba yung required allowance, required balance of the allowance for doubtful accounts? So, sabi, it's 10% of the gross accounts receivable. So, meaning that's 5 million multiplied by 10% or 500,000. No? So kung yun yung required balance, so therefore that would be your ending balance. So ito na ngayon yan. No? And remember, the normal side of allowance for doubtful accounts is credit. No? This is a contra account to your AR and that's why it's a credit. So wag papalito dyan kasi the moment that you put it in a debit side, then magkakaroon ka ng error sa calculation. No? Okay, so kung meron na tayong required na 500,000 as ending balance, and then now we can calculate for the doubtful account expense. No? So all you have to do is work back. No? So paano magiging 500,000 to? Kung meron kang debit na 100,000, edi kunin mo lang yung addition. So 600,000 less 100,000, so that's 500,000 credit. Okay? So the answer to question number 3 is 600,000 or letter D. O tandaan na, ang tinatanong is the doubtful account expense, not the ending balance of allowance for doubtful accounts. So be careful with that kasi ang bilis, ang pwede ka magkamali. No? So instead of choosing 600,000, ayun, nakita mo kasi si required allowance, kinuha mo si 500,000. So magkakaroon ka ng error. So sayang kasi napakasimple ng problem, dahil lang na-excite ka, nabilugan mo yung maling sagot. No? So be careful. No? Especially yung mga ganito kasimpleng mga problem, dito madalas nagkakaroon ng mali. Dahil nga na-excite ka, sa sobrang excitement mo, ayun, na-shade mo na agad. No? So sayang. Okay, so let's have problem number 4. In problem number 4, we are being asked to calculate for the net realizable value of the accounts receivable on December 31, 2021. So let me read the problem. An entity used the net price method of accounting for cash discounts. In one of its transactions on December 26, 2021, the entity sold merchandise with a list price of 5 million to a client with a given trade discount of 20%, 10%, and 5%. Credit terms were 4/10 and 30. The goods were shipped FOB destination freight collect. The total freight charge by the client was 100,000. On December 27, 2021, the client returned damaged goods, original build, at 500,000 pesos. So let's have problem number 4. Parang ang dami kasing information given, no? Pero sisimplihan natin yan. Okay. Siyempre, una natin tignan is yung trade discount. No? So remember, ang binigay sa atin is trade discount of 20, 10, and 5. No? So paano ba yun? So you have list price of 5 million. Una natin computein syempre yung 20%. So 5 million multiplied by 20%, that would be 1 million. No? So meron ka na agad na balance of 4 million. And sabi pa, 10% ulit. No? So 4 million multiplied by 10%, you'll get 400,000 pesos. Get the difference. So we have a balance of 3,600,000. And finally, 5%. No? So 3.6 million multiplied by 5% or 180,000. Get the difference. You have the gross amount of 3,420,000. So tapos na ba? Hindi pa. Meron ka pa kasing sales discount. So sabi, it's 4 over 10 and 30. So 3,420,000 multiplied by 4% or 136,800. Then you now have the total list price of 3,283,200. No? Pero tandaan, this is just the list price pa lang. Hindi pa yan yung requirement natin. No? So let me just highlight this one. Okay, so ano ba yung entry natin dyan? So it's a debit to AR and credit to sales of 3,283,200. So paano na-compute yan? Ayan, yan yung ginawa natin nung umpisa. Okay. Next, we have to calculate for the sales return. Sabi kasi dyan, the client returned damaged goods originally billed at 500,000. No? So that's 500,000 multiplied by 96%. Bakit 96% plus? Eh syempre, we have also calculated the discount, no, of 4%. Of course, kung halimbawa binil natin siya at discounted price, ultimately yung sales return will also have the discount. No? So that's 500,000 multiplied by 96%. Or 480,000. Okay? And then finally, compute natin yung, yung freight out. No? So debit to freight out of 100,000. So tandaan class, this is FOB destination. We should pay. I mean, the seller should pay. But it's freight collect. So meaning, it was the customer who advanced the payment for the freight. No? So therefore, we have to recognize that. No? So it's a debit to freight out of 100,000 and credit to allowance for freight of 100,000. Okay. So now we have the total AR. Paano na-compute yung total AR? That's 3,283,200 less 480,000 or 2,803,200. And then less allowance for freight of 100,000. So the total net realizable value would be 2,703,200 or letter C. Siguro ang kailangan lang bantayan dito class is the provision or calculation of the net amount or the list price. No? Kasi there's trade discount involved and this is, I mean, this has been discussed probably during your first year. No? So during basic accounting, so ito, pinaka-refresher na natin. No? So tandaan, to arrive with your net list price, you have to consider the trade discount and the sales discount. So that's problem number 4. Okay, so let's go now to discussion problem number 5. So the requirements are, number one, what amount should be reported as doubtful account expense for the current year? And number two, what is the net realizable value of accounts receivable on December 31, 2021? From inception of operations, an entity provided for doubtful accounts under the allowance method, and provisions were made monthly at 2% of credit sales. No year-end adjustment to the allowance accounts were made. The balance in the allowance for doubtful account was 1 million pesos on January 1. So this is the beginning balance. No? During 2021, credit sales totaled 20 million. Interim provisions for doubtful accounts were made at 2% of credit sales. 200,000 of bad debts were written off, and recoveries of accounts written off amounted to 50,000 pesos. An aging was made on December 31, 2021. So, meron ng aging, no? November to December, 6 million. Ayun, percentage of uncollectibility would be 10%. July to October of 2 million, 20%. No? January to June, 1,500,000, 30%. And prior to January to 1, 2021, ito na yung more than 1 year, of 500,000. So the percentage is 50%. Based on the review of collectibility of the account balances in the prior to January 1, 2021 aging category, additional accounts totaling 100,000 to be written off on December 31, 2021. Ito na yung importante dito, effective December 31, 2021, the entity adopted aging method for estimating the allowance for doubtful accounts. So initially, at the start of the operation, ang gamit nila to estimate allowance, the method that they're using is percentage of credit sales. No? So that's 2% of credit sales. Pero towards the end of December of 2021, they opted to use aging method. No? So yun yung kailangan nating alamin. So let's have problem number 5. Okay, so problem number 5, kunin muna natin yung required allowance. So paano yan? Okay. So 6 million. Oops, na naman ako. Ayusin ko lang para at least hindi kayo malito sa number. Ha? Sige. Okay, so first, let's calculate the required allowance. So paano yun? Kunin natin, syempre, di ba, gagawin na daw natin is based on aging, di ba? So required allowance would be based on aging of AR. So paano yun? So meron ka una 6 million multiplied by 10%. So this is balance. This is uncollectible. This is now the required allowance. So 6 million multiplied by 10%. So that's 600,000. 2 million, ayun pa rin naman yan, multiplied by 20%. So that's 400,000. 1,500,000 multiplied by 30%. So that's 450,000. 400,000. Bakit to 400,000? Kasi tandaan, meron kasi nakalagay doon, additional accounts totaling 100,000 are to be written off. So alisin na natin siya doon. No? So 400,000 multiplied by 50% would be 200,000. So the total AR is 9,900,000. And the total required allowance would be 1,650,000. So kung meron na tayong required allowance of 1,650,000, pwede tayo ngayong i-complete yung different items and then squeeze in natin to, no? Kasi this is the requirement number 1. Requirement 1. Okay? So allowance of 1 million. So this is given. No? So this is the beginning balance. And then recovery of 50,000 also provided. No? Recoveries of accounts previously written off amounted to 50,000. So given naman yan. And then magkano ba yung na-write off? So sabi dito, 200,000 pesos of bad debts were written off. But remember, there's also in here, no, in the last paragraph, sabi, account balances in the prior to January 1, 2021 bucket, additional accounts amounting to 100,000 are to be written off. No? So that's 200,000 plus 100,000 or 300,000 pesos. No? So ngayon, meron na tayong, ang kailangan na lang natin kunin is yung doubtful account expense. So paano yan? So we have to work back. Doubtful account expense. So that's 1,650,000 plus 300,000 minus 50,000 minus 1 million or 900,000 pesos. So the answer to requirement number 1 is letter C. Also tandaan na, it's either you do the T account approach or go straight, no? Kasi yun na lang naman yung mga elements involved in calculating for your doubtful accounts. I mean allowance for doubtful accounts, and then from there you can squeeze in, no, yung doubtful account expense. Pero tandaan lang, dapat marunong ka mag-work back, no? So kung isang element is not available, then you by all means, you know, you can calculate it, no, given these other information. Okay. So, meron na tayo ngayong doubtful account expense. So, that's letter C. That's requirement number 1. Now, let's go to requirement number 2. What is the net realizable value? Okay. So, una muna, magkano ba yung doubtful account expense as recorded or as reported? So, that's 900,000. Yun na-compute natin nung sa requirement number 1. Pero yung as recorded, and remember, that's 20 million multiplied by 2%. Ito yung previous. Kasi 'di ba, nag-decide lang naman sila na mag-change ng method effective December 31, 2021. So meaning to say, throughout throughout the year 2021, ang ginagamit nila to account for doubtful account expense would be the percentage of credit sales. No? So magkano ba yung credit sales natin? So that's 20 million multiplied by 2%. Yun naman yung 2%, yun yung percentage of non-collectibility. Ito yung method na ginamit nila for the whole 2021. So therefore, with that, meron tayong increase in expense. Paano yung increase in expense? Tandaan, ang recorded lang per books is 400,000, pero magkano ba yung required? It should be 900,000. So therefore, we have to prepare an adjusting entry. So that debit doubtful account expense of 500,000 and credit allowance for doubtful accounts of 500,000. So with that, we are now ready to calculate for our net realizable value. So the balance of our AR would be 9,900,000. Ayun. Less allowance for doubtful account of 1,650,000. Ayun, no? So ito yung na-compute natin kanina. Ito rin siya. So 9,900,000 less 1,650,000, our net realizable value is 8,250,000 or letter B. So ang tatandaan lang palagi natin dito, class, is kung merong shift from one method to another, of course, kung ano yung previous method, yun yung recorded per books, no? So therefore, we have to do an adjusting entry, no? Para makorrect yung what's recorded, and ma-account natin ano ba yung required, no? So in this case, class, the doubtful account expenses recorded, no, per books is only 400,000. Ito yung previous method nila, no, based on percentage of net sales of credit sales. Now, dun sa bagong method, ang bagong method is aging, no, aging of AR. So that's the required doubtful account expense, no? So that's 900,000. Okay, so that's problem number 5. Let's go now to problem number 6. So tsagain lang natin. Problem number 6, the requirements are, number 1, what is the balance of accounts receivable on December 31? And number 2, what amount was recognized as bad debt expense for the current year? So let's have problem number 6. An entity provided the following transactions affecting AR during the current year. So you have sales, cash and credit of 5,900,000. Cash received from customers, all of whom took advantage of the discount feature of the credit terms for over 10 and 30 of 3,024,000. Cash received from customers of 2,100,000. You have AR written off as worthless of 50,000. Credit memo issued to credit customer for sales returns and allowances for 250,000. Cash refunds given to cash customers for sales returns and allowances of 20,000. And finally, we have recoveries on AR written off as uncollectible in prior periods not included in cash received from customers stated above. So yun na, very clear, for 80,000. At the beginning of the current year, the balances are accounts receivable 950,000 and the allowance for bad debts of 100,000. At year end, an aging of AR indicated that 170,000 would be uncollectible. No? So let's have problem number 6. Okay. So in problem number 6, unang requirement is the AR. So of course, we have AR beginning of 950,000. So that's given. Credit sales, or remember class, the sales provided here includes both cash and credit. No? So therefore, we have to deduct the cash received from cash customers. No? Or 5,900,000 less 2,100,000. And since this is cash received from cash customer, automatic, ito na yung sales on cash natin. No? Oh, that's 3.8 million. Ay, ayoko red. Collection of 3,024,000. So that's given. Of course, sales discount. Ito. To compute for the sales discount. No? So that's 3,024,000 over 96% multiply by 4% para makuha lang natin yung sales discount element. No? Kasi tandaan, itong kasing cash received natin, ito na yung total cash paid, no? Or total cash collected. Ang kailangan lang natin dito class, sales discount. So wag magpapalito, kunin lang natin yung discount portion. Oops, ayaw na naman. So that's 126,000. Next, we have the AR written off as worthless. So that's 50,000. And finally, ayun, yung sales returns and allowances, yung sales, yung credit memo amounting to 250,000. Okay, so then we have total AR of 1,300,000. So the answer to requirement number 1 is letter A. Okay. So we go now to requirement number 2. What amount was recognized as bad debt expense for the current year? So again, class, in this type of problem, so we have to squeeze in. So paano yan? Of course, una, we have now the required allowance end of 170,000. So parang same approach as what we did, no, in problem number 6, no. So we have the written off of 50,000, so that's given. Recovery of 80,000 also given, no. And the beginning balance of the bad debts, no, of 100,000, so also given. So with that, kunin lang natin yung squeeze in lang natin yung doubtful account expense. So that's 170,000 plus 50,000 less 80 and less 100, or 40,000 pesos. So the answer to requirement number 2 is letter B. Lagay ko lang to ulit para hindi malito. Ay, parang may mali ako dito. Dito dapat. Yun. Okay. So that's problem number 6. Actually, that ends our discussion on accounts receivable.
This has been your instructor, Mark Gibson. Thank you for learning with us. See you in our next discussion. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!